Welcome to our forum today on building safe communities for people with disability. Just a couple of housekeeping things to start with. There is a silver Hyundai in a disabled accessible parking bay that does have their lights on. So I don't know if that's anyone in this room. I'm not seeing anyone jump up suddenly to rush out, so I'm assuming it's not. But if you think it might be you, I've got the license plate number here, and you can check with me in a moment. Also, just for toilet facilities, an accessible toilet is out through the door, and there's a corridor that goes down to the toilet facilities. We'll also be breaking at morning tea and lunch and afternoon tea, and in the out in the corridor at the behind here where there's a beautiful view of the lake is where we'll have morning tea and coffee. If for any reason we do have to evacuate the building, then it'll be going directly straight out through the double doors that you came in through, and we'll muster across the car park at the lake, the grassed area just across there. And I hope that you enjoy the day today. So I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the land of the Whadjuk Noongar people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I think it's really important to acknowledge that for Aboriginal people with disabilities there are many intersectional issues, and so when we talk about abuse and neglect, this is something which affects all different people with disabilities, but also many people who are potentially in disadvantaged situations. And when there's multiple factors that happen, then that actually can make the risk of abuse and neglect higher as well. I would also like to acknowledge many of the people with disabilities who over the years have been the subject of abuse and neglect, and who may have died in institutions or because of practices both in the past and that we're still trying to change in the present. And it's because of the many people who have had the courage to speak up that we're now able to talk about this more openly. This is a pretty heavy topic and a serious topic, so if at any time during the day you are feeling a little bit overwhelmed or just need to take a break, that's perfectly okay. There's a beautiful lake outside which hopefully might help you feel a bit more relaxed, but that's perfectly okay if you need to get up and go out the room for a little while, or if at the break time you just need to have a chat to someone. I'm very happy to have a chat, as is Taryn, who's one of the other organisers here as well.
And the thing is, Samantha, if you're out in the lake out there, you know the smell, it reminds me of the playing cards that I used to play when I was with the staff in the institution.
Yes, unfortunately the lake has got a little bit of an algae smell at the moment, yes. Now I did want to just do a quick bit of scene setting for everyone, because we're here today because we're talking about disability, people with disabilities and being safe in the community, and we've called our this week of events Disability Safe Week. But we wanted to just get clear for everyone around the room what we mean by abuse and neglect. So I'm not going to go into too much detail because I know that Samantha Connor, who's the next presenter who co-authored the report Behind Closed Doors, will talk a bit more about that. But when we're talking about abuse and neglect for people with disabilities, that includes lots of different things. So we would include in that restrictive practices, we would include in that types of discrimination, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and you'll see that the fact sheets that we've done as part of our project actually cover each of those areas. We also know that it can happen in many, many different situations, which is why it was really important for us today that we tried to invite people from many different sectors of the community, and that during the week we actually had events which were focused around different aspects of people's life. our experience, as again you'll find out more from Sam Connor, is that abuse and neglect can happen in many different situations. It can happen in school, at home, in institutional settings, in health settings, and from many different people. And it's often those combination of factors at the context of where someone is, as well as disability and other factors, that lead to the higher risk of abuse. But also when we talk about being safe, we wanted to make sure that people understand that we're not talking about wrapping people up in cotton wool to keep them safe, or helping, or hiding them away to keep them safe. And in fact, most of the research shows that the more you segregate and congregate people away from the eyes of the community, the more likely abuse and neglect is going to happen. So when we talk about safety, and I'll say that when we had a session yesterday with a number of young people with disability, we were talking about what does it mean to feel safe, and it was really fantastic. The strong theme that came through was people saying that feeling safe was actually about having trusted people and trusted organisations around them that they knew they could go to. And that was what was the most important thing about feeling safe. And I've had the great pleasure of being a local government councillor for a few years. But one of the things that came from doing that role that I've learnt about is in urban planning and community safety, they actually use this concept called passive surveillance. So if you're building a bus stop or public toilets or things like that, you don't put it in a spot where it's hidden away from the public view. You make sure that there is passive surveillance, that if anything was to happen to somebody at that toilet or at that bus stop, there are people around in the community who might be likely to have seen it. But also because it's in a place where the community can see it, people might be less likely to do things like that. So you'll find now that, for example, things like walk-through underpasses don't actually get built nowadays because of that idea of community passive surveillance and not actually building things where it's hidden away and there is more likely for things to happen. And so that same concept is actually what we're talking about when we talk about feeling safe, that actually people who are connected and have lots of people around them are safer than people who are hidden away. So I just wanted to get that bit of a context for us to start with. But we were very lucky 2 years ago when we had the Senate inquiry into abuse and neglect being done by the Federal Senate, to have Samantha Connor and Ben Keeley do a project for People with Disabilities WA and Developmental Disability WA to try and actually tease out what was happening in WA when it came to abuse and neglect of people with disabilities, what happened historically, what was happening now, and what were some of the policy and practices that were issues and could potentially be changed. And from that project, that was when we first came up with the idea of Disability Safe Week as a way of being able to let people know that there were safe places that they could call up and people that they could talk to be able to talk about their experiences. Samantha Connor and Ben Keeley co-authored the report Behind Closed Doors, which then became our submission to the Senate inquiry and to the National Disability Insurance Scheme safeguarding discussion paper as well.